Hi, my name is Harry Kargman. I am the founder and CEO of Kargo. I am so excited today at Brand Innovators to interview Allyson Witherspoon, the global CMO of Nissan. And she's been at the company for 10 years. And I'm just, to have a marketer that has been doing this for as long as you have, starting 10 years at the Infinity brand, but even going to the North American CEO, global CMO, now of the entire brand, to be able to talk about that journey, but not only that journey, being able to shepherd through all the amazing things that you have in terms of electric, in terms of thinking about the arc of sort of creating the brand and really sort of, and you must be, nobody stays in a CMO job for that long. Like it's usually like a 2-year stint max.
It's definitely, I've kind of gone through different, different levels through that time. I think I've been a CMO, I guess 5 years.
I think they said that it's like a year and a half.
Yeah, it's like 18 months, I think, is actually what the normal cycle of it is. But I think it is interesting, but I think my biggest philosophy is, one, are you inspired? Do you love what you do? I think that helps a lot of things. I think the other thing is, you have to have I think working for a company that supports you and trusts you and where you feel empowered, that's been such a great experience at Nissan. So I think it's intentional. It's intentional.
Yeah, but it's a balance, right?
Of
on the
course.
one hand, they got to trust you. On two, you got to kick ass.
I have to perform.
You have to perform.
Yeah, you have to perform, and I think the perform is that's like brushing your teeth. That's just what you do. You have to do that. And then I think and the company piece of it is: are you empowered to make good decisions? Do you have transparent conversations? Are you able to navigate the ups and downs that any brand is going to go through? And I think I definitely have that. I also have an amazing team. And so that's, all those things packaged together, that's why I am where I am and why I stay.
So let's talk about that arc. Obviously, the nice thing is being at a brand for as long as you've seen the evolution. Obviously, the brand is doing well. I think some of your spokespeople that you see on TV, and you've been bold about having strong female heroes as your spokespeople. Walk me through what has really worked in the past, and how do you sort of see that evolving in 2024 and beyond? Yeah,
to me, I think it's being true to yourself and being believable, and we're a brand that it's all about innovation for excitement. And I think we have incredible products and technologies and services, but it's not just to do it because we have incredible engineers, which we do, but it's how do we excite consumers? And so it starts with that. And then how that comes to light is that's going to change based on what consumer behavior is. And I think we have a strong strategy, and then we allow ourselves to make sure that we're aligning with how consumers want to engage with us as a brand. So I think it'll vary based on messaging, what people are interested in. We have a massive product lineup. Not everyone is going to be interested in the Nissan Rogue. So how do we make sure that we're able to find consumers that are interested in all of our products? Where do we meet them? What are the experiences that we allow around that? And I think that's what changes, from year to year, because those types of things, there are things that tweak. We have different products that are going to be rolling out and launching, and so we allow all of that to help kind of guide how we bring our innovation for excitement strategy to life.
Do you want to go into a little more detail? I think sharing maybe a couple case studies from this last year, what are those, you talked about places where you show up that really sort of bring your products to life. Maybe take everybody through maybe a product and a place that you're really proud of.
Yeah, and I'll do two, and I'll kind of look at one in the U.S. and a global example. So we recently launched the Nissan Ariya about a year ago, and what we found is that on YouTube, as an example, people who are interested in the Lo-Fi Girl channel were 30% more likely to consider an electric vehicle. And so we took that data point, and then we created this concept around, well, how do we create kind of a Lo-Fi Girl experience, but how do we make that Nissan? And how do we make that relevant for the Nissan Ariya? So we actually created over a 4-hour ad.
Wow.
That ran on.
4-hour ad.
Yes. Some people might think we're crazy, but we weren't. And it actually drove 18 million views of it. People were spending hours watching that. And it was interesting because it resonated with the audience. It was enough to be advertising, but not advertising. And so I think that's an example of it. It's, again, taking that data insight. The other one is pole to pole, which we just finished at a global level. And that's where we worked with electric vehicle influencers who wanted to actually test to see if an electric vehicle could go from the North Pole to the South Pole. And so we worked with them. We had a Nissan Ariya. It drove from North Pole all the way through kind of North and South America, all the way to the South Pole, and they made it there right before the holidays. And the car never broke down, and we documented it. They documented it all along the way. And I think it's, again, you're reaching out to those audience. We're leveraging all the tools that are available to us, whether it's on a massive platform like YouTube, or if it's something that we work with, local electric vehicle influencers. And so I think it's very much about what the insights are and how we can resonate with those specific audiences.
Do you find that, like, in the media landscape, it's hard to get attention? Because if you think about it, you're like
yes.
in CTV, trying to figure out
yes.
digital video, trying to figure out display, trying to figure out influencer.
Yeah.
Like, how do you navigate that?
The amazing thing about being a marketer is that there's so many different things that you can do, and that's just awesome. The difficult thing is that there are so many different things that you can do, and your budgets aren't exponentially, that
growing.
Much bigger. Yeah, exactly. And so I think, to me, what we try to do is we try to just understand the audiences. Where are they? How do they want to interact with us? The days of having a one-way conversation with consumers, that doesn't exist anymore. I think it's just flat out rejected. And so how do we create space to have two-way conversations, or to encourage people to take actions or to learn more about us as a brand, and then ultimately get them to test drive the vehicles? And so I think it very much is data-driven and consumer-driven. And we like to push ourselves, and we like to test things. So, how do we test AI capability in some respects? How do we test different platforms? How do we make sure that we have a certain amount of everything that we're doing? There's a sense of this test and learn. And sometimes things work really well, and sometimes they don't. It doesn't resonate or it doesn't have impact, and that's okay. That's part of the process. That's part of the learning.
When you think about next year, 2024, and going into 2025, how do you think you need to leverage some of these other capabilities? I mean, what's gonna change in your viewpoint from 23 and 22 when they weren't there? Whether it's generative AI, whether it's some of these new CTV formats, whether it's how social's changing and leveraging,
yep.
Social formats. How do you sort of see the marketing mix changing?
I think the marketing mix will be, that's going to be audience based, and where the consumer is going to be, where they're more likely to be receptive to the messaging and willing to kind of take actions. I think, to me, the biggest change is actually in the content piece of it, because now there isn't one format, there are thousands of formats. And, I think, you used to have kind of these, like these 360 campaigns, and you have, all these kind of different cut downs and things like that. And actually now we need to have much more personalized content at scale. And what's interesting today is that we have tools like generative AI that are able to help us accelerate that process. It's still not perfect, but I think those are going to be the biggest things, probably where we kind of explore the most, is going to be how can we create much more content, more personalized, faster at scale.
No, I think that's great. That's the problem that needs to be solved.
It's an accelerator. To me, generative AI becomes an accelerator.
It's a toolkit.
Yeah, it's a workflow. It's a way to kind of get to insights faster, and it's a way to kind of take some of the upfront and accelerate that. That's how we're looking at it.
So now that you're actually in a global role instead of the North American,
yes.
How does the things that you do here scale across the globe and vice versa? Like, it's a much harder and more macro
yes.
challenge,
yes.
probably.
And I'm based in Japan, and I think it's the biggest.
Did you actually move to Japan?
Yes, I did.
Oh, amazing!
I lived in Japan before as well. I was there for 2 years on another assignment for Nissan. It's an amazing. And Japan's incredible. I'm going to plug it. You should go visit. But I would just say inspiration comes from everywhere, and we have global, we have kind of global marketing meetings that we have throughout the course of the year. And I think the most interesting piece where we have all of our key marketing leads in all of our markets, they come in, and the biggest thing is that what we talk about is what's happening in each of the markets. And it's so interesting, and I love to see how something that happened in Thailand can inspire the U.S. market, or something in Canada can inspire Italy as an example. And so those are the things that I think are really interesting, and it's just about kind of creating exposure, and maybe there's a solution that another market found that we want to just allow to inspire some of the other markets. So I think it's learning from everyone and being open to different ways of doing things or kind of tweaks or enhancements that we see around the world.
Do you think the markets are more similar than people believe, or are they more different than people believe?
It differs. It kind of depends on what you're comparing. I think the strategy is the same. How it comes to life is where the nuances are, and that's what the difference is. Because you have markets, Mexico as an example, we have almost 20% market share. So the perception of Nissan is very different than it's going to be in in some of our European markets. And so I think the solutions that we need to find and how we go to market from a marketing standpoint is going to be very different. But maybe there's something that comes from, Mexico that will translate, or vice versa, which is especially when we talk about technology.
So let's pivot to electric, since that's probably on the top of most people's minds, especially given the environment and climate and your solid state battery, which sounds amazing. Why don't you share a little bit about what's happening there?
I mean, I think for us, electric, we have been pioneers in electric. We actually had the very first electric vehicle, which was back in the 1940s, which was the Tama.
Amazing.
And then we had the Nissan Leaf, which was the first mass-produced electric vehicle, and that was, I think it was 13 or 14 years ago. So we're not new to electric. Our strategy, and we have what we call Ambition 2030, is to be very intentional about how we scale electric vehicles and making sure that we're in the right vehicle segments that consumers are interested in. As an example, the Nissan Ariya is an SUV, intentionally so, because we know that that is a segment that consumers are interested in. And then I think also understanding that it's not going to be the same. It's not going to scale the same around the world. That's not a one-size-fits-all. Some markets are going to move very rapidly. China is moving incredibly rapidly when it comes to adoption of electric vehicles. European markets are the same way. And then you have other markets that are a little bit slower to electric, and Japan is an example of not as many electric vehicle solutions. US is also moving a little bit slower. And so our strategy is to really be intentional and to let it be based on what the consumer behavior is, and allow combustion engine, what we call ICE engines, that's available for consumers, or electric vehicles are available for consumers. We also have a technology called e-Power, which is essentially a supercharged combustion/electric vehicle that you don't have to plug in and charge, and that's for something that's maybe a little bit more in between. We want to provide solutions. We want to be inclusive of everyone's vehicle needs.
Do you find that part of the reason for the lack of adoption is like infrastructure? It's like garages having power. Is that the thing that probably more so than even sort of a manufacturer's capabilities? It's more about policy, and it's more about putting infrastructure in place to enable that to happen? Or is there other things that are sort of the impediments to adoption?
Yeah, and I think, again, this will vary slightly depending on what the market is. I would say infrastructure plays a big role. Range anxiety is very real. And it does weigh into consumers' decision when it comes to, am I really going to plug this in, or am I going to get stuck somewhere? And so I think it's I think that's a big piece of it. I also think electric vehicles in general are more expensive. And so I think the accessibility of there is maybe not quite where it needs to be, especially based on where consumer confidence is right now. And that's why we're investing in solutions like all solid state battery, because it will significantly reduce the cost of the electric battery, but it'll also allow for extended range as well. And I think those are the things that our consumers are really looking for. And I think when infrastructure is no longer kind of a scary point, when you have more accessibility to getting into the vehicles, those things I think will really change. Because what we are seeing is that consumers are they're much more conscious about what they're driving, especially in kind of impact and, carbon footprint, things like that. So they are looking for these solutions. They're just, if they're not quite ready, then e-Power is something that is maybe a little bit more of an interim step that we're seeing.
So I was just with Janet, who is the CMO of Samsung, and what we were talking about is it the features that are the selling product, or is it like the passion about the brand that's the selling product? And as the CMO, how do you determine if the marketing is more about the passion of the brand or about the functionality of the actual product?
I think when it comes to automotive, and that's kind of that, it's hard to kind of try to predict what it is in another category that I'm not in the weeds on, but from a car standpoint, from an automotive category, it's the brand first.
It's the brand
first.
It's
the brand first, and I think it's because a vehicle is a very considered purchase. It's number 2 to your house. It's an investment, and I think people want to feel good about their decision. The features then help kind of build that up and justify and validate it, but it is about the brand and sometimes it's about the specific product, but those two go hand in hand from our point of view.
No, it's very funny, like the CFO, it's if we have these features and we bring this price down, then they're gonna...
It's the brand. It's the brand. And especially now because there are so many more choices for consumers, it becomes very much a brand discussion.
All right, so we're gonna do some predictions.
Oh, okay.
So 2024, obviously, is a year where it could go into recession, or it could have a soft landing and there's a rebound, there's a lowering of rates. Obviously, consumers have more disposable income or less. The question is, when you think about 24 and then going into 25, is this a year to invest and to grow your overall exposure and take market share, or is it to be more cautious?
You should always invest in Nissan, so always invest in us. To me, I would say it is, I think where it appears that we're moving, I think it's a little bit of both. I think there's a piece of caution. I think decisions are becoming much more intentional. I think that's a good thing too, because I think we've all been through kind of financial crises in the past. So I think it's going to be a little bit of both. I think 2024 is a little bit of a tiptoe. We know that interest rates are starting to, they're not climbing anymore, but how much are they really going to start to come down before you can feel it in your wallet or in your bank balance? And I think that's what makes it a little bit of a tiptoe.
How different will it be from 23? Will it be net positive, or do you think that we'll have to be more careful? Or will it be the same?
From a consumer standpoint?
From a consumer standpoint, but also from a business perspective.
I think it'll be a net positive.
It'll be a net positive.
I think what we've learned a lot, especially over the last few years, is I think we've learned how to do things differently, more efficiently, more effectively. I don't think that we're going to suddenly go back to, maybe not being as intentional as we were. If you think about to how people were investing, even as a brand, I think the days of like 2017, 2018. We're not looking at things the same way anymore. We have to very much be thinking about how can we drive the greatest impact with what we're doing. From a consumer standpoint, I think it's the same thing. I think there's been enough of discussion. I think the interest rates have really impacted people. I think consumer confidence is not in the best place. Adding an election year, obviously, kind of that adds an interesting dynamic to it as well. So I think all of those things are what kind of creates a little bit of caution, but it's optimistic caution, which is why I would say tiptoe.
So that's my last question. As one of the, having the longest runs as a very significant CMO driving force in the industry, what are the one or two things that you think sort of created that longevity? And then what are the things that will sort of be part of the job going forward, as the world pivots over the next, number of years?
I think I set out to be a different type of CMO in that very business oriented, very data driven, but also creative at the same time. And so I set out to be a business partner and a business driver, a function that is a business driver. I think sometimes in organizations, the marketing team can be, the party planning, and that's always frustrating as a professional marketer. But I think I've been able to change that perception within Nissan, and really, we're seen as a strategic function and a strategic partner. And so I think in creating a much more kind of analytical, data-driven, pragmatic approach to things, I think that's helped. I also think I've been very fortunate to work with an incredible team across the board, whether it's in the US, my team in Japan is incredible as well. And so I think those two things together, and it's how do we work together? How do we create excellence? How do we evaluate it? And how do we keep learning from what that's doing? And how do you do that over and over and over again? And I think it's a constant learning. I'm always trying to be better at it. I'm never satisfied at all. And I think that helps too, but I'm surrounded by an incredible team.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for today. It was really great. I think super enlightening to the folks on the camera that are tuning in, and really amazing insights. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you very much for having me.